All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. I've got a great guest today, somebody I really enjoyed talking to the first time around. And there's a couple of things that we want to discuss today, and I thought this would be a great person to do so. So please help me welcome back to the show, Rashmi Samant. Rashmi, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and having me back on your show.
No, absolutely. So, let's before we get into it, I just want to get a bit of an update on you. How are things, back at university?
So it's sunny in Oxford, which I
there you go.
So it's been
rare.
sunny ever since I got back, with very limited rain here and there. So that's good. That's good indication. Things are good. I've been back, and I'm back to university life, back to hectic schedules, doing academic work and meeting with friends and doing summer brunches. So it's been good. But with the case, I think it is still under investigation. So.
Right, of course. In 2045, we'll get like an update on the investigation.
Hopefully.
Yeah, let's hope so. Have you gotten any indication as to when you might get an update?
Not really, but I think there are hints about an upcoming indication. So we've reached that stage. So maybe soon enough. And,
yeah. So in the meantime, you've been writing. And you wrote a very interesting article for Times of India. That's right?
Yes.
For Times of India, yeah. You wrote a very interesting article for Times of India. It was kind of, about cancel culture, some of the problems that people are facing, some of the problems that you have faced with regards to cancel culture. If you want to read the article, guys, it's in the description of this video. It'll be in the show notes of the podcast as well. But tell me about sort of the article. Tell me about the genesis of the article. What is the sort of background of the article? How did this come about?
Well, I think most of the article comes from a lived experience based on how sort of I was treated and how I was labeled a number of things.
Right.
So I think the genesis of my perspective on cancel culture turning into a witch hunt of those who don't meet woke standards is literally a lived experience for me, because I was literally at the end of a witch hunt not too long ago. And I think recently a lot of events have happened in public domain with people. And that sort of, has given me a broader perspective on the issue. What happened with the cricketer Ollie Robinson, though I think I read a day or two ago that he's been finally cleared, thanks to sensible people on the board, that he's been cleared and he's back to play cricket. But what did
happen with him?
So Ollie Robinson, what they did was he had he became a cricketer and he was quite famous, and people started digging his old social media posts.
Right.
They went as far back as I think 9 years ago, from when he was a mere teenager, from when he was 18 or 17, and they picked up a few insensitive tweets, which I think were kind of jokes at that time for for people of that age, and they picked it up and. They sort of broadcast it everywhere. He said that that he was ashamed, he apologized, and even his friends came up and said that he did feel he was embarrassed by what he said when he was a teenager, but he was removed and he was suspended from international cricket, and his life was sort of kind of ruined. His career was kind of ruined, and so that happened with him. And I think Bari Weiss, who's a senior editor with the New York Times, was kicked off from her job just because she used to platform alternative views to the staple sort of leftist diet that the paper follows. And so I think these were the things I sort of brought in to sort of speak about in that.
It's also funny that nobody's really safe from it. I think you posted this on your Twitter about Veer Das. I think like the Veer Das, the comedian, who
Yes.
posted something about like, it was a silly joke about his pronouns, whatever. And this is a guy that, believes in absolute freedom of speech. He made a whole stand-up comedy video about freedom of speech, and people need to get comfortable with speech that they find very uncomfortable. And so I think he got like a couple of like hateful comments under the tweet, and he deleted the tweet, and he gave a whole apology about, hey, now I hope everybody feels better. So even the people, who call themselves, who identify with the left on pretty much every issue, even they're not safe from this.
True, and I think Labour Party here in the UK is the most
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of leftist organization that you can come across in the whole
Yeah.
wide world, and the Labour Party is embroiled in a cancellation sort of, they're cancelling each other now.
Cancellation Olympics.
Yeah, cancellation of each other is going on, and they're all pitting against each other. So I think it's there. You can never be, intent is not given importance. What
Yeah.
Veda said, I absolutely don't find any of his jokes funny, or I don't think of him highly as a comedian, but that's my individual perspective. But I have to give him credit that that tweet was basically self-depreciation, depreciating. Like he was just making fun of himself when he said what my pronouns are, and he didn't mean any harm to the community or to people who use pronouns. He didn't mean it in a sarcastic way to them, but to himself, and they even had a problem with that. I mean, that I think is quite, and I think the hypocrisy is that he's the guy who goes around insulting Hindus, Hinduism, and what we do, and he defends his right to do that under the garb of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. But when the same thing, when the woke mob came after him, he didn't say freedom of speech, or I'm going to reserve my rights of freedom of speech or freedom of expression. Instead, he chose to be a hypocritical sort of double standards guy. So that means that he doesn't really, he's a careerist basically. He's going where the gravy is, and where he's going to find relevance and acceptance. So I think as a person, if you can't stand up for yourself, then what kind of a stand-up comedian you will be?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, stand-up's kind of in the word, right? It's in the profession.
It's in the word. It's in the word.
Yeah.
I think the joke just writes itself.
It was very interesting reading your article, because so the article's kind of like a debate in fact. So on one side, it's you making sort of the case against cancel culture and those kinds of witch hunts, and the other side is another author making the case for cancel culture. And he sort of made the case that cancel culture, or holding people accountable for what they say, is very important to maintain sort of public civility or something like that. And so the argument sort of for cancel culture, I disagree with on two fronts, because number one, I don't think anybody's really saying that people should not be held accountable for things that they said. If it's something really harmful or something really, really horrible that someone said, yeah, sure, I get it. If there's a private company that doesn't want to be associated with that opinion, if you want to get rid of them, I understand. Nobody's saying that. People are saying that don't hold people accountable for saying relatively innocuous things when they were a completely different person, like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that, And the other part of that argument also is it's almost kind of like saying, and we talked about this offline a little bit as well, that it's kind of like saying that don't drive a car if you don't want to get into a car accident. If you want to eliminate car accidents from the world, then just stop driving cars. And it's like saying, well, witch hunts are kind of important to maintain like public morality, or blasphemy laws are important so that religious tolerance is not affected in any way. Does that make sense?
It does. The analogy does make sense. Yeah, it's literally like, you go to a jewelry store, and then you sort of cancel all the diamonds because they were rocks a million years ago. So they were rocks. So, I don't acknowledge the fact that they're diamonds now. So people go through so much, through time, because of, experiences that they have. And 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when people are literally teenagers, they are within this silo of the school that they go to or the family that they're in. And you don't choose which family you're born in. If you're
Yeah.
born in this very privileged family where all of these conversations do happen, then that's your privilege. And discriminating for somebody for not having that sort of awareness is absolute discrimination. It's absolute discrimination.
Yeah.
And not recognizing the fact that people can change, that people can sort of grow, that people can succeed even if they come from different backgrounds. That's discrimination. That's basically killing the whole concept of society, that that people can't sort of and also I think it's kind of hypocritical, because all of these are sort of wannabe activists. They can find problem in anything and everything.
Yeah.
They are so hell-bent on bringing justice in the world that they will find a problem in everything they see. And that is not how we can live as community. And I'm saying that this is completely separate to legislative censure or public censure of people who have done horrible things. That exists. You brought in the whole analogy of like driving cars, to prevent car accidents. You're required to have a license, you're required to wear seat belts, and all of that. That exists. That exists within our society as well. But cancel culture is literally asking you to stop driving, to sort of stop accidents. And that is not how we proceed, and that's not how we sort of go forward as society. We will be stuck in this old sort of back and forth of sort of society. We won't grow as a society. I think it's literally it's cancerous. It
is. And it's sending you back into a time where you could be prosecuted for your speech. That's people like to think, at least in the West and in democratic countries, people like to think that your speech is sacrosanct. You can't be prosecuted for speaking your mind. But unfortunately, this is different. This is kind of almost different, and it's very interesting. Where in the sense that it's almost like a religious cult to an extent, and it's almost like a religious ideology, this sort of cancel culture wokeness. Because I remember I read an article in Quillette some time ago. It was written by like a Black Jewish author, and she said that she attended like some meeting of like progressive Jewish people who were going to be speaking up against like Islamophobia or something like that. And she said that she was really blown away in that meeting, where like at the end of the meeting, it was almost like a sort of like a church sermon, where they were like, one of the leader who was speaking in the group would like raise her hand and she would say, I used to be blind, but now I am woke, or something like, I used to be asleep, but now I am woke. And then the entire audience raises their hands, closes their eyes, and repeats, I used to be asleep and now I am woke. And I'm like, do you know, I feel like you have to have such a lack of self-awareness to not realize that this is a cult. This is almost like a religious cult, which is
it's basically propagating a sort of a totalitarian perspective by saying that you cannot think or feel a different way. This is it. And basically they're trying to like infiltrate even schools and kindergarten, where children are taught all of these things, so that they're in a way allowed to only think in a certain way. It's sort of like a totalitarian, pushing a totalitarian perspective. I totally get it. I think it kind of reminds me of a bunch of Bollywood people who once started this trend of repeat after me. So
exactly. It's very culty, man. It's very sort of like, it's very religious-y, this whole thing. It's funny because and the other thing I wanted to talk about was that I found in your article to be very interesting is you talked about, when you were talking about Ollie Robinson, one of the things that you talked about was that, sort of the way the education system in Britain works, the way he has been brought up, the way he has been taught, instills in him certain sort of preconceived notions about maybe other cultures or other people. And what you mentioned in it was what's sort of the need of the day in terms of education in Britain, and maybe in a lot of other Western countries as well, is decolonizing education and the way students are taught in these universities, because it's very sort of Western centric, where the world sort of revolves around the West. What would that involve? What would sort of decolonizing education involved? Because I do have a follow-up question to that, but let's go with this first. Like, what does decolonizing education involve?
So I think it's a very fine line.
Yeah.
I totally don't mean that you should cancel and remove all the sort of texts and sort of written by colonizers. But I think a lot of the history has been whitewashed here.
Yeah.
Whatever is taught here is not the truth. Basically, so many things are whitewashed. For instance, here they think that the Bengal famine was not caused by Winston Churchill, but
Yeah.
on the colonizers, but by Hindu Samaj, and these things
Yeah.
are taught here, and that would make you feel like that colonization was actually a positive thing that happened to India.
Yeah.
And I still remember in my presidential debate that when I was speaking about decolonization, people came up to me and straight away said that why are you pushing for decolonization, because it was a positive thing, it civilized people.
Wow.
That's what they said. And these are the
Really?
woke people. These are the woke cancel culture people who
Oh my
have
God.
so little awareness about the world around them that they literally came up to me and said that, why? Because, it's civilized people, basically. And I think in a way that, we are not having these broader conversations, which can actually sort of halt problems. Because for Ollie, I think 18-year-old, like maybe 10 years ago when you were 18 years old and maybe a British boarding school or any sort of British school, what you were taught was basically that that this was a great nation, and that that nations around the world are kind of backward, and that that they are backward because that the people there are backward and they have low cognition. So making jokes about people from around the world was acceptable that time. It was kind of a cool thing to say and do. That was because the entire education system sort of propelled that. And instead of holding the education system accountable, or the sort of leaders who put that in place in the first place, or the whitewashing accountable, these people are being held accountable who, like, in their folly, sort of wrote it off just because it was cool at that time. So we are not looking at why, we're basically looking at symptoms of the problem and considering the symptoms to be the greatest sin, but not the problem itself. Basically, we're just addressing the symptoms and not the problem itself. We're not basically sort of killing the problem in its entirety. And I think cancel culture sort of enables people to enables the problems to stay in society, because people are so scared about talking and discussing the issue, because they feel
Yeah.
the moment they say or they address it, they're going to say something wrong that it's going to get them cancelled. For instance, I think we can use it for the word Islamophobia. That word is being used like dhania right now, like literally get like egg pack free.
Put
Like,
it in everything. Yeah.
yeah, they just sprinkle it on everything.
Yeah.
There are some, I think there are some issues that need to be discussed and that need to be addressed. But the moment you say anything or anything pertaining to the community, you just get branded Islamophobic. So
Yeah.
how do we address bigger problems? So basically, you're literally cutting things off at a point where you're not allowed to. So I think cancel culture is actually limiting actual change within our society. It's actually sort of enabling a sort of draconian and hierarchical system within the community.
Yeah, it is. It is. It almost like shields certain communities from any kind of scrutiny or any kind of discussion, which ultimately I do think harm those communities. And that was kind of the point that I was making about the decolonization bit as well, because unfortunately what I've noticed is that, especially in like US universities, I'm not that much aware of like UK universities, so you can tell me better. But in the US universities, you'll notice that with sort of using decolonization as a pretext, certain woke ideologies have really proliferated the lexicon of these Western universities, like intersectionality, like critical race theory, which they have a kernel of truth. Just like decolonization studies, they have a kernel of truth in what they're talking about, right? But unfortunately, the way they've manifested themselves in these universities is that there is only one truth, and that truth is that anybody who is sort of non-white, let's say in the US context, anybody who is non-white is essentially oppressed. That is the only reality. Their only reality is their skin color, that their sexual orientation, their religion. That is all that those people are. That's what they've been reduced to. So if you are brown or black or woman or gay or something like that, then your only reality in life is to suffer. is that you're backward and there's no hope for you, essentially, because you're always going to be pushed down. And those ideas have manifested themselves in India and Indian universities as well. Like, you see this whole Jai Bhim, Jai Meme phenomena. That phenomenon basically says that, Dalits who have genuine grievances in India, by the way, have the exact same setup, the exact same problems in India that Muslims face, who used to be an aristocratic class not very long ago. So equating the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe communities who have genuinely suffered in the previous few centuries in India to Muslim communities, especially bloody Muslim Ashraf communities that have been the aristocracy for 800 years in India. Like, that's not just disingenuous, but I do feel like that's insulting to Dalits who have genuinely suffered.
I agree with you on that note, and I feel that people who within the Dalit community who come up with problems within the whole sort of woke lefty mob, they're the people who actually have sort of benefited from say reservation. They've gotten their education for generations, and they've come out. They've been in civil service and everything. And when they cry out, they don't represent the real problems that are still within the Dalit community, but they cry out in a sense to sort of gain attention and to, sort of create sort of that, oh, I'm a victim, give me more sort of a narrative, because of which real people are suffering, real marginalized people are suffering. But the people who have, it's literally, it's literally sort of remanufacturing this whole thing that people who are on top will always stay on top. People who are on the bottom will never be allowed to get on the, top. And the people on top are sort of devising new ways to stay on top. Right now, they're playing the whole victim card to sort of stay on top, because of which real oppressed, marginalized people will never get a chance to sort of represent. For instance, I think I take it from my own example. I was the first Indian woman to be elected the president here. And by removing me on all of these false pretenses, they actually missed that whole opportunity of having somebody who actually was from somewhere, usually there aren't, people who've lived, born, raised in India, come here and, then become president. That's never happened. And it is a sort of, I don't know, that there have been many limitations for that to happen, colonial and so forth. And by removing me, they've sort of stopped that from happening, that whole sort of phenomena from happening. And so I think oppressed will remain oppressed for the time being. And, the sort of people on top will stay on top. They will keep enabling these kind of shenanigans.
It is funny that for all the problems that they see with the oppression of brown people, for the oppression of people of color, for the oppression of women, they're pretty quick to get rid of a woman of color. They're very, very quick to get rid of a woman of color the moment they thought that she's not useful to the cause. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
It is interesting. I think it is dangerous. And it is a bit of a fine line that we'll need to thread between sort of figuring out how to decolonize various disciplines while at the same time not falling into the trap of intersectionality, woke culture, critical race theory and things like that. Like that's the fine line that we need to sort of thread the needle, right?
I think the problem is because these people have overtaken and sort of taken over all the good names. For instance, woke meant to be truly aware, but these people are not. Decolonization meant, sort of enabling a sort of unbiased view of the world and sort of stop this whitewashing of history when it's written. But they've sort of taken it over and they're doing something else. They're sort of doing else under that garb. And then what they're doing is instead of having sort of that, they're doing that entire thing. They're taking over the good words. Liberal meant to be truly free. I think we are liberal. We're truly free. We freedom of speech, freedom of expression. We support it. And the other side is, employing double standards and hypocrisy when it comes to freedom of speech. So I think they have sort of taken over the good words. And they're pushing their agendas behind the sort of mask of good words, because when you Google it up or when you look it up, the meaning is something like good. So sort of take the good things in the society and use it to sort of masquerade what they want to. And then we get left with all the other things in, the society, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because all the claims that they used to sort of discredit you, especially with this sort of
Islam.
attacks on your background, on
Yeah,
your familial
Islamophobia.
background, the Islamophobia and the, oh, her family member has a photo of Sri Ram in her profile picture, that automatically makes that person or her entire family is now anti-Muslim, is now like a Hindu supremacist or something like that, which is it's obviously very disingenuous. It's clearly hateful. And what was funny was that the recent sort of Pew Research Center survey that was released completely puts to bed that notion as well, that being from a Hindu background automatically makes you sort of like an Islamophobe or an anti-Muslim. In fact, even being from like even being someone who considers themselves like a Hindu nationalist and that vote for the BJP, that automatically makes you like an anti-Muslim or something like that as well. And we were talking offline about the survey as well. So for people that might not know, this is a survey that was done by the Pew Research Center on India. And again, the link is in the description. If you guys want to read the entire survey, you can go ahead and do so by clicking on the link down there. But it had some very interesting results that sort of, I feel like, are relevant to our discussion. Because one of the allegations that was, again, like I said, made against you was that because she's from a Hindu background, she's probably automatically anti-Muslim. And if you look at the results here, Pew found that a vast majority of Indians feel that they have religious freedom and they see respecting all religions as a core value of being Indian. And that's 91% of Hindus, 80% of Hindus believe in respecting all religions. Another very interesting thing that I found was, it was something along, here we go. I think it's over here. Yeah. Hindus who see Hindu and Indian identity as closely tied express positive views about religious diversity. So among Hindu voters that voted for the BJP and say that it's very important to be Hindu and to be able to speak Hindu to be truly Indian, or people that you would consider Hindu nationalists, 65% of them believe that religious diversity in India is a positive thing. This is even higher, by the way, than Hindus that don't vote for the BJP, Hindus that don't consider themselves Hindu nationalists. So the sort of narrative that has been created by a lot of South Asian organizations, and I saw there was a couple of South Asian organizations that are based in the United States that were really, really upset at the results of this survey. And they were like, oh, this is just, it's helping promote like a Hindu nationalist agenda and stuff like that. And I'm like, I had no idea, number one, that the Pew Research Center was a Hindu nationalist organization. That's news to me, obviously. But yeah, these are very inconvenient results for certain kinds of agendas, is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, you can't blame them. It's a matter of livelihood for them. They'll have to shut down because they peddle hate for a living. And if their hate is being called out by research, which is, which subscribes to a methodology and which, has like sort of seemingly unbiased, sort of basis, then it sort of destroys their entire livelihood. What are they going to, raise funds for? What are they going to, what are they going to create noise about? So, I mean, that is it. You brand people who don't fit your narrative, and you sort of ostracize them as biased and this thing just because it doesn't fit your narrative. That's the typical like 101, like woke culture, cancel culture, leftist 101.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's been a few South Asian organizations that have propped up in at least the US in the past few years, and their entire sort of raison d'etre exists upon painting India as a intolerant country and creating like a coalition of these oppressed minorities from India, which again this sort of Pew poll puts paid to. But what is the situation like with South Asian groups in Britain? Have you ever had a chance to interact with them, or have you ever come across any?
Oh, I've come across a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, for instance, if you're here for purely like, if you're studying and if if you don't like sort of, at least I am from the STEM background. So I think
Right.
politics has been really irrelevant to me in the sense of what I study and what I do. So in the STEM background, unless and until you're running for office or you want to be like sort of socially active in political clubs, these
Yeah.
things don't matter. But there are lots of like organizations formed with an
Yeah.
ideology of sort of bringing justice to South Asia. So I think there are plenty of them, and it comes from a place of privilege because here, I think you also agree that that is US and UK have capitalized a lot of sort of things, and they are leaders of world economy
Yeah.
on the basis of what they've looted from the rest of the world for
Right.
centuries. So they have a lot of wealth now based on how they've looted and sort of established their monopoly. And now they have a lot of plenty of time to sort of solve other problems of the world, to feel
Yeah.
better about themselves. And a lot of the brown people sadly have capitalized on that sentiment that exists here and sort of used it as a front to further that South Asia is suffering a lot, and that that
Yeah.
all of this fascism exists, there's no freedom of speech, and sort of guilt them into sort of rescuing Indians from lack of freedom of speech
Yeah.
and lack of any sort of freedom. So yeah, I think.
Yeah. It is funny because, you know, on the one hand, you have the sort of intersectional CRT ideology that says brown people are perennially oppressed and there's no future for them, there's no hope for them, so they must be supported. On the other hand, the same brown people tend to be fascists in India as well. And on the other hand, if you look at the United States, there's a new sort of paradigm in the US where Asians are now considered in woke language white adjacent. So there's been like a bit of a move in US, particularly in like sort of prime US colleges like Harvard and stuff like that. And I think Hassan Minhaj, I don't know if you remember this, but Hassan Minhaj, when he used to do that show, Patriot Act, he did a whole episode on how Asians are horrible because they're getting into Harvard and Yale and these Ivy League colleges in big numbers, and they're taking seats in these colleges that would have otherwise gone to like black and Hispanic students, which means that because they're taking the seats of black and Hispanic students, it makes them bigoted and it makes them racist and it makes them, he used the word bad Asians. So now there's a term called bad Asians as well.
I think this is a freebie mentality. To be honest, I feel that the society has had discrimination, and we've had like genuine discrimination, genuine problems. But a lot of the people, there's also this scenario where a lot of people are using this sort of discrimination that existed to
Yeah.
substantiate a freebie mentality. People want to just get in freely. They want to like get jobs without putting effort, without being the best. They want to get into universities without being the best in
Yeah.
their field, without putting in that effort. They want freebies basically. They want that sort of a free, it's the freebie mentality hiding under the garb of discrimination
Yeah.
basically. And then if
Yeah.
you try to challenge it, they will say that you disprove the whole idea of discrimination. No, I don't, because I come from I come from a place where I don't have a lot of privileges, but I
Yeah.
sort of worked my way here. And I mean, I know what it means. I know what discrimination means and everything, but I do not want you to sort of use discrimination as a weapon to get
Yeah.
freebies. That shouldn't happen. It's quite it's quite funny because I had a conversation with a Filipino once, and
Yeah.
he's Filipino American now. His
Okay.
father moved to the Philippines I think 40-50 years ago, when there was sort of there was a sort of movement of Filipinos there. And he told me that the Filipino community, well, this can be like a quite I don't endorse any of these views, but it's
Right.
just discussion of what discussion we
What they
had.
think. Yeah.
what they think. And he told me that I'm not saying that it's the entire Filipino community either.
Right.
This disclaimer, because I don't want the
Everything
woke
needs a
mob to
disclaimer
come.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want the entire woke mob to come here and say that this is not what the entire community thinks. But
Yeah.
this is
Say nice, Rashmi. Say nice.
very nice. So you're treading that carefully. So this was just a sort of a candid conversation that I had with a member, and he
Yeah.
said that normally they do vote Republican because they feel that people shouldn't. That they genuinely worked to
Yeah.
get American citizenship in a legal way, but they feel that people shouldn't be getting it as as a freebie, like they illegally cross in and
Yeah.
then they get all of this, the nation that they built, that they put an effort to, that they put an effort to sort of be upstanding citizens of and have all of these privileges that come from being an American citizen. They don't want it to be distributed as freebies to people who are just calling out discrimination.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's a
and
very
you see that in US manifest in different ways as well, because you have a group of Asians, you have Indian Americans, you have Chinese Americans, you have Korean Americans, various Asian communities that do very well in the United States, particularly in terms of education, in terms of like the jobs that they occupy, in terms of like civic participation. I think Indians rank very highly in terms of like civic participation, participating in like politics, sending representatives into politics, those kinds of things. And as a result of that, you've seen like a certain amount of, and again, none of these communities are just getting it handed to them, right? The Koreans and the Chinese are not just getting Yale seats or Harvard seats handed to them. They're studying hard, they're getting into these universities based on merit and absolutely nothing else. So, because of that, and because of the kind of hate campaign, sustained sort of hate campaign that has been spread against them, that they're somehow bad Asians for not letting enough black and brown people or Hispanic people into these universities taking their seats, we've seen something that's not really talked about in the United States much, which is we've seen a spate of anti-Asian attacks. So over the course of the pandemic, we've seen a bit of a rise in anti-Asian hate, anti-Asian crime. A lot of that has been motivated from the right wing, from the far right in the United States. But a very large amount as well, something that's highly underreported, a very large amount of that hatred is also being spread in so-called liberal cities like San Francisco, like Delaware, like New York City. One of the mayoral candidates that ran recently in New York, Andrew Yang, he ran on the platform of stopping anti-Asian attacks in New York City. And he also acknowledged that a lot of these attacks were committed by other groups of color. So you've created now a situation through this, while you, on the one hand, you're trying to build this solidarity, between different groups of color. At the same time, you're also dividing different groups of color, creating sort of hatred between different groups of color based on perceived grievances that don't really exist. So
right.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think yes. It's very very it's kind of funny because it's so sad. It's so sad. It's actually very sad, but
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because when a lot of these anti-Asian attacks do happen, like sort of Asian attacks do happen there in the US, the first thing that these leftist sort of woke liberal mob does is, this is how you tell their name. Tell their name, say their name right. That's what they're riled up about. Not about how they're killed. They're
Yeah.
killed. Life is taken away. That that a future of possibilities is taken away from them,
Yeah.
and that they have somehow enabled it by spreading all of this crap about how they're bad Asians and not addressing that. Instead, you're worried about how their names are not being pronounced properly. I mean, seriously, that's the problem you see. You
Yeah.
see, you think Asians are being killed because the names are not taken properly. No, it's because of this hate that's being sort of spewed
Yeah.
and it's being
All the
enabled.
anti-Asian hate ads that you're going to see, Rashmi, on social media, they're all about, hey, stop being rude to Asian people. But it never really goes into why people are being bad to Asian people. Never really goes into the why.
Yes. It doesn't explore the stereotypes that exist, that
Yeah.
that you're taking away all these, and it is being enabled by the left, by all of these theories that they put out, which are not practical in the real sense. But I'd rather have somebody be, sort of rude to me than have the stereotype that I'm taking away their livelihoods from them. Because, if they are under the impression that I'm actively destroying their livelihood, then they're going to do something more extreme towards my community than just be rude. So yeah, they're just, sort of they're so, like, it's so fake that they want to address all of these symptoms, that they sort of forget that there is an entire problem which is progressing alarmingly fast towards, consequences which are very bad for our society.
So what do we do? Very finally, to wrap this discussion up, what's something that you would recommend people? Let's say that there are some open-minded people within these circles. What would we recommend to them to say, hey, look, this is not the right way to approach the problem. Maybe this is a better way to approach the problem?
I think firstly, we need to become upholders of freedom of expression and speech within, the limits of legislative and sort of public, levels of decency and laws. We need to, sort of have freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and we need more people involving in their communities. A lot of the people here, when they see what happened with me, a lot of the people came up to me personally and said that they're truly ashamed of how I was treated. But they didn't have the guts to go out in public and say that, or to stand up for me in public. So I think we should call out things that we think are hypocritical or have double standards. The sensible people should take more active sort of role in society and not dismiss things, saying that, we're not going to do that. It's these people. We have to take the loudspeakers away from people who basically do not represent our views or our opinions, and we need to start becoming more responsible citizens. The sensible, compassionate people. We need to stop going up to people personally and telling them how much you admire their courage or how wrong you think they were treated, and do that in public where they're being publicly attacked. If you see an Asian being, publicly harassed or attacked, go interject and stop them instead of making videos of it and virtue signaling on social media. Go stand in between people, break that fight, protect your fellow Asians. Do that and stop virtue signaling on social media.
So it's very schizophrenic in the sense that on the one hand, you say, Asians are being discriminated against, you want to stop Asian hate and all of that stuff. On the other hand, you call them white adjacent and say that they have this inherent privilege as well. So make up your mind, decide kar lo. Are they white adjacent, or is there anti-Asian hate? Like which side do you want to agree with? You can't be on both sides.
Exactly. And I think we need to stop complicating our society so much. There's nothing complicated in our society. There are people with good intentions, and then there are people with bad intentions. We need to recognize that. And people with bad intentions usually hide behind words which sound like they have good intentions, and we need to stop giving them the leeway in society. There are so many people with bad intentions who hide under the garb of liberal views or woke views, and they perpetuate hate within society. So we need to cut the crap and truly identify people who have good intentions, who have bad intentions, and judge them and give them platform accordingly, and not because they said something politically incorrect, because we are humans by the end of the day. I think the sort of a lot of things govern what we say. Fatigue, we get tired. Sleep, we might not have had sleep. We might have had sort of good or bad day. We might have met somebody who was incredibly rude to us, and we're having a bad day, or we're having a good day, or we haven't had enough rest. So that affects how we articulate our words. That doesn't mean that we want to go destroy the world. So stop being so cynical about words, and start seeing each other as humans. As humans who have good intentions, who have compassion, and sort of segregate people based on whether they have that, and get down to basics. Care for each other, genuinely care for each other. I think the moment we start genuinely doing things for each other, which takes effort, it takes you to sort of get from outside your comfort zone.
You actually give a crap about someone.
You actually give a crap about someone. So I think start being genuine. And stop giving this sort of genuine advice on social media or on platforms. Not saying that it's a bad thing. It's a good place to raise awareness and to spread information. But cut the crap. Be there for people in reality, and that will definitely bring in change.
All right. So before we go, what's next? What's coming up for you, Rashmi? You wrote this article for Times of India. Are there any more articles, any more content that we can expect from you?
Of course, I mean, I'm always ready to write if anybody wants to platform me. So I think, deplatforming is a reality that we have to sort of deal with. And
Yeah.
if I get invited, then sure, for sure, you can sort of expect me to come out, because I'm unashamed of what I have to say. And I
Right.
truly believe that I have good intentions for each and every member of the community.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think, yes. So hopefully, if that there's more platforming, then I will definitely write more articles and share some of my insights and, through lived experience.
Yeah.
And yeah.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, then, guys, in that case, again, Rashmi's article is in the description of this video. Go check out the article, read it a lot so that Times of India realizes how many people have read the article and they invite Rashmi back to write more articles for them. So go check it out, read it, check out the Pew Research Center survey in the description as well. Once again, Rashmi, thanks a lot for taking the time out and thanks for speaking to me today.
Likewise, it was lovely speaking with you. Thanks for having me back here.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do one of these again soon. But in the meantime, guys, you can go follow Rashmi on our social media. I'll leave the links in the description too. Again, if you liked today's episode, like it, share it, subscribe, abuse us in the comments. Everything helps the algorithm. So do whatever you want. Go ahead and become a member on Patreon or on YouTube. We will see you for the Thursday episode. Stick around with me for a second offline, Rashmi. And we'll see you for the Thursday episode, guys, and the meme review. But in the meantime, stay happy, stay healthy. We'll see you next time. And bye-bye.